On This Week in Enterprise Tech, we talk about security breaches, data leaks, liquid cooling, and how you should give your chief information security officer a nice big hug. Plus, we have Curtis, Heather, and I talk with a great guest, Malcolm Ross, VP Products at Appian, to talk about low-code and no-code solutions. Twy it on the set.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
This is Twy it, This Week in Enterprise Tech, episode 329, recorded February 15th, 2019. Low Code 101. This episode of This Week in Enterprise Tech is brought to you by Sophos Cybersecurity. In an age of evolving cyber threats, you need evolved cybersecurity. Powered by artificial intelligence, Sophos can detect threats before they strike, killing ransomware, viruses, and other cyber threats dead in their tracks. Get a free security scan and or free trial today at sophos.com. And by LastPass, the #1 most preferred password manager. Secure every password protector entry point to your business and reduce the threat of breach at lastpass.com/twit. Welcome to This Week in Enterprise Tech, the show that's dedicated to you, the enterprise professional, the IT pro, and the geek who just wants to know how this world is connected. I'm Maresca, your host, your guide through this big world of the enterprise. But I definitely can't guide you by myself. I have to bring in the brains of this outfit, starting with our very own Mr. Curtis Franklin, senior editor at Dark Reading. Curtis, great to have you back on the show.
It is great to be here. It's a beautiful, warm day here in Florida. But you know what? Nothing beats the warmth of the Twy it Riot. It's great to be here.
Fantastic. Now you're getting ready. You're gearing up for some conferences here pretty soon, right?
Yeah, in 2 weeks, I'll be out in San Francisco at the RSA conference. And I figured it out a couple of days ago. If I see everyone who's invited me to a meeting, I can give each one of them 48 seconds. So, I'm working on my timing, but that should be a great conference. Going to see a lot of interesting people, including some who have appeared here on Twy it, and looking forward to sharing some of the great information with everyone on the show, either from RSA or in the week to follow.
Okay, well, that's some quality time with Mr. Curtis Franklin. So that'll be great for them, 48 seconds. But speaking of quality time with a quality person, we want to also bring back Heather Williams, Senior Product Solutions Architect at Rutgers Network. Welcome back, Heather.
Hi, thanks, guys.
Now, you're traveling as well pretty soon here as well, right?
Yeah, I think my husband and I are going to hand keys off at the airport this weekend as he arrives and I leave. But yeah, I'll be out in California for a while.
Fantastic. You're going to RSA first, or?
I'm going to Ruckus headquarters first, and then okay. I'm going to try to make it to RSA. Depends on how much I miss my husband.
Got it. So if we see you at RSA, we know that's a context clue.
Maybe a subcontext clue.
Okay. No. Thanks, Heather. Well, folks, we have a pretty great show for you. It's packed with security breaches, data leaks, liquid cooling, and we have a great guest to talk a little bit about how it make it easier for you and your organization to build business-critical applications with little or no code. But before we do, we have to get into these great blips, some great news in the enterprise world. So let's go ahead and get started with that. Now, if we remember, we chatted about how there was 620 million or so user records leaked from 16 different websites a couple weeks ago and being sold on the dark web, and you can download it either as an average torrent as well. Well, it seems that that was only the beginning of that data being acquired. This past week, additional 127 million more records were announced leaked to the public from 16 more sites. Which sites, you ask? Well, there was some sites like 500px, MyFitnessPal, and Coffee Meets Bagel, and many more. Now, in addition to these sites, the same hacker has released data from 8 different marketplaces as well. 18 million records from travel booking site Exigo or like Exigo, live video streaming from YouNow, and 40 million records stolen, as well as House, the site about housing design and internal design, which recently had a data breach that listed 57 million records stolen, as well as 1 million records from PetFlow, and there's many more sites that come in there as well. Now, how did they do it? Well, here is the hacker actually was nice to us and very helpful. They described the method that they got into these sites. According to the hackers' listings, these particular sites had an old or outdated MD5 hashing algorithm to scramble the passwords, which these days is easy to unscramble. Now, 6 of the 16 databases were running the same backend PostgreSQL database software. Exploiting a bug in these versions, the hacker was able to dump the database to a file and download it. Now, for the amount of data they're selling, the price is not that high. You can have the hacked data for a small price of just $14,500 in Bitcoin. Now, if you are wondering where the data is, or if your data was part of that dump, there's actually no service just yet or research firm that's acquired the data in order to report whether you've been exploited or not. But if you do have data on these sites, you might want to go and change some passwords.
Well, speaking of changed passwords, there's a consortium pressuring retailers for better IoT security. The Mozilla Foundation, the Internet Society, and 8 other organizations have teamed up to push retailers to demand that IoT manufacturers improve security in their devices. The initiative seeks to enlist retailers to use their greatest power, that of dropping products from distribution, to convince manufacturers that adhering to minimum security and privacy standards is, well, good for business. In an open letter to Target, Walmart, Best Buy, and Amazon, the Mozilla Foundation lists the IoT security features it sees as the 5 minimal requirements. They are encrypted network communications, provisions for security updates, strong passwords, including the ability to change those passwords, vulnerability management, which includes a workable vulnerability reporting and mitigation system, and strong, transparent, understandable privacy practices. These requirements are echoed in a blog post from the Internet Society that calls on consumers to carry these demands to their favorite retailers. The recommended requirements for these IoT devices are a subset of the Internet Society's IoT Trust Framework, a best of requirements with 4 broad areas incorporating dozens of comprehensive security factors. So you want IoT security to improve? Go look at it and get in touch with your favorite IoT retailer.
And let's hope that it has more teeth than WPA3. 1 ringy-dingy, 2 ringy-dingies. For you young whippersnappers out there, that was a hysterical reference to Lily Tomlin's Ernestine, the telephone operator character from Laugh-In. And for those of you who don't know what a telephone operator is, you're going to love this story. We all know that the National Do Not Call Registry is a toothless joke. If you were unsure, here are some numbers for you. 29 billion robocalls in 2016. Those are old numbers, though. How about 3? That's the number of calls I got this morning before 9 a.m. And that's despite being on the National Do Not Call Registry, despite AT&T's auto filtering, and despite the paid service that I have running to categorize an auto block and create manual blocks, something I do multiple times a day. In the past 2 years, the way I use my phone has fundamentally shifted. Voice calls used to be in the top 3 of the services I wanted my phone for, and today it's just about last. And my new outgoing message indicates that I rarely answer, but will return legitimate calls. But never fear, the guy that decided net neutrality was an example of government overreach and was stymieing ISPs and broadband equality has created a robocall strike force. The task force includes 33 telecom and tech companies that are each working to develop a standard authentication technology to verify exactly where calls come from. FCC Chairman Ajit Pai noted, however, that, quote, some of it is difficult to do because these are highly technical areas, unquote. If you have a problem with the billions of robocalls made each month, the FCC has some good advice for you. If you do answer a call and are instructed to hit a button to stop receiving calls, just hang up. Don't hit that button. If you get a call that you believe is a scam, write down the phone number and file a complaint with the FCC. Don't respond to a "can you hear me" call. And of course, register all of your phone numbers on the National Do Not Call Registry. And for those of you who were confused by my opening archaic reference to a skit from a 1960s TV show, this entire blip has been an archaic reference. The FCC actually formed that task force in early 2017. Well, our phones may have been rendered almost useless since Ajit Pai took over the FCC, but at least we're safe from the evils of net neutrality. So we've got that going for us.
Now, software and service development companies are always looking for ways to ensure high quality code and ensure that they have updating processes and engineers to do so. Now, the problem is that these methods is that they introduce additional overhead into the software development lifecycle. Well, the Mozilla organization, the company that develops Firefox, is looking to cut some corners and still ensure high quality code output as well. Now, Mozilla is deploying Clever Commit, a machine learning driven coding assistant developed in conjunction with the game developer Ubisoft. Now, Clever Commit analyzes code, changes as developers actually commit them to the Firefox code base. It compares them to all the code it has seen before, see if there's actually similar to that code in the system, and knows that it's actually a bug. Now, if the system thinks that the commit looks suspicious, it actually warns the developer. Now, Clever Commit can even suggest fixes for the bugs as well. Now, Ubisoft has presented commit assistance based on research called Clever, a system for finding bugs and suggesting fixes. Now, this system has actually found some 60 to 70% of buggy commits, though it also has false positives rated of just about 30%. Now, even though the false positives rate is quite high, users of the system nonetheless felt that this was a worthwhile signal to them and actually save them from creating bugs in the future. Now, this is only the beginning of these types of systems to be added to the DevOps arsenal. This use of machine learning is accessible to large code bases and not just exclusive to Mozilla and Ubisoft. Now, last year, Microsoft actually introduced a feature called IntelliCode in Visual Studio. Now, IntelliCode has examined some of the most popular public GitHub repos out there, more than 2,000 projects, each with more than 100 stars. Now, it's to figure out the best coding practices, and then it uses that to actually analyze your code. Now, if your organization is looking to reduce costs by ensuring less bugs in the wild, and intelligent code assistance might actually be in your investment in the future.
Now, here's something new. There's a new strain of Mac OS malware that's camouflaging itself as Windows software. A new strain of Mac OS malware is disguising itself as a Windows executable file to evade detection and embed itself on a system. But it's not like the malware authors are in the cross-platform avant-garde. The .exe file that carries the macOS malware will not, in fact, execute on a Windows machine. Join me as we go down the malware rabbit hole. Researchers from Trend Micro discovered the malware inside the installer for a popular firewall and network monitor called Little Snitch. Inside the standard macOS.dmg installer is an exe file that is part of the Mono framework. That's technology that is used to allow .NET applications to run across multiple platforms, including Windows and Mac OS. Malware authors typically use higher-level executables like Adobe Flash files, JavaScript, PHP, that sort of thing to move between platforms. And most of those file types are now scanned by malware protection software and blocked if malicious behavior is detected. But because .exe files will not on their own execute on macOS, most macOS anti-malware packages don't scan or block the contents. Now, this is aimed squarely at the Mac OS because, as we said, the exe file that's used to deliver the malware payload will return an error message if you try to actually execute it on a Windows system. Now, as for how you avoid this, it's pretty simple. There are a handful of anti-malware packages that are beginning to scan for this now that it's been discovered. But if your organization doesn't have that kind of software, then be sure that multi-layer security is in place and remind users that they should only download applications from fully vetted and well-verified sources.
Well, continuing the theme of scaring the crap out of you today, how to safeguard your tech and your money while traveling. Most of us are quite familiar with security experts' admonitions to not connect to unsecured public Wi-Fi systems, not only to coffee shops, but also in airports and hotels. And you've heard about one data breach after another at travel companies like Marriott, British Airways, Delta Airlines, and the travel booking site Orbitz. These sites are targeted because they are rich in information that's actually more valuable than credit cards. At risk is your highly sensitive, personally identifiable information. Risk management companies have recommendations about how travelers can protect themselves. These go beyond making sure that your devices are locked and encrypted and to not plug into public charging stations. They include creating a digital persona when booking travel, setting up a new disposable phone number using a service like Google Voice, and to forward these to the phone number that you want to protect. They also recommend using a throwaway email address to be used only when booking online, and using a service like physicaladress.com when creating a new mailing address for you, and then signing up for a credit card that's only used online and for travel. A global privacy officer at Carlson Wagonlit Travel, a travel management company, advises being very careful about speaking with colleagues and possibly sharing information in confidential information in public places, and to not leave confidential documents unattended in either a conference room or guest rooms at hotels and elsewhere. A travel research company reports that a growing number of travelers are becoming uncomfortable with sharing their personal information with travel sellers, stating, quote, "The lesson for travel suppliers here is that no matter how good they think their cybersecurity hardware and software practices are, they may never be good enough. Sadly, there will always be one hacker a step ahead at some travel company." And for you guys who are uneasy hearing this and are now worried about your safety when traveling, this was a beginner's course. The advanced training is titled Attending Conferences While Female.
Now, we talk a bunch about net neutrality or lack of it and how we think it might affect consumers, but we're now starting to actually see evidence of it actually affecting consumers. It's not actually surprising that the cellular carriers were the first ones to violate the old net neutrality rules. Now, this is the most competitive part of the industry, and the cellular carriers are not going to miss an opportunity to gain a marketing edge. Now, AT&T is openly advertising that cellular customers can stream the company's DirecTV Now product without accounting against its monthly data caps. Meanwhile, all of the competing video services like Sling TV, PlayStation Vue, YouTube TV, Netflix, or Amazon Prime actually count against AT&T's data caps, and video can quickly kill a monthly data plan down to allotment. Now, AT&T's behavior is almost a pure textbook example of why net neutrality rules were put into place to stop the ISPs from putting competitors' products at an automatic disadvantage. Now, AT&T is the biggest cellular provider in the country, and this creates a huge advantage for DirecTV Now. Now, you probably actually remember last November we talked about a large study of 10,000 or 100,000 cell phone users by Northeastern University and University of Massachusetts actually showed that Sprint was actually throttling Skype as well. Now, that same study showed numerous incidents where all the major cellular carriers throttled video services at times, like YouTube was the #1 target throttling, followed by Netflix, Amazon Prime, and NBC Sports app. I seem to remember a bunch of these ISPs making pledges that they won't actually violate the spirit of net neutrality, even if the rules were abolished. Well, it seems to me that the spirit of net neutrality might be open to interpretation. Well, folks, that does it for the blips. Next up, we have the bites. But first, we have to thank a next really great sponsor of This Week in Enterprise Tech, and that is Sophos Cybersecurity. Now, you and I know that organizations worldwide are worried about cyber threats, breaches, data leaks, privacy, and more, and it becomes a global concern. Well, we have all heard about the increased number of data breaches over the past years. Well, Sophos Cybersecurity has evolved the approach to cybersecurity by using the most advanced artificial intelligence to detect threats before they strike. Now, imagine killing ransomware, viruses, and other cyber threats dead in their tracks. Now, Sophos actually uses deep learning to interpret data and respond to threats with little to no latency. Now, there are a ton of vectors of attacks out there. They are increasing in sophistication as well. Well, this is where Sophos gets to work and makes sure you're covered. Now, if you have any doubt, there was actually a recent independent security test done by SE Labs that ranked Sophos #1 with the best protection ratings across the board for large enterprises and small businesses. Now, Sophos has provided advanced technology for millions of businesses worldwide with their premium capabilities for both Mac and PCs alike. And there's also Sophos Home. Now, this brings real-time protection from the ransomware attacks, malicious software, hacking attempts, and more. Now, you might think, well, if it does all those things, it must be tough to get it installed and deployed. That's where Sophos prevails. The interface is super simple, and management is done online, and it actually allows you to secure your own laptop and managing the security of multiple devices in your home remotely. Now, you can sign up for a single account and protect all the Macs and PCs in your home from a single console. And because it's cloud-based, you can even use it for your relatives to secure even if they're thousands of miles away. You can remotely manage their security, clean up threats, and keep their systems safe. Now, you as know, Sophos' tagline is security made simple. So the whole thing is incredibly easy to use. Just log in from your browser and start securing your systems today. Now, whether you're a home user or a large enterprise, Sophos has you covered. In fact, some of the largest businesses in the world use Sophos to stay protected from the ransomware attacks that devastated multiple businesses last year. Third-party reviewers consistently rank Sophos among the best cybersecurity providers. With synchronized security, you can manage all of your Sophos products from a single cloud-based console. Get a free trial today and or free security scan at sophos.com. That's sophos.com. And we thank Sophos for their support of This Week in Enterprise Tech. Well, folks, it's time to jump into the bites, and we have a couple pretty good ones today. Now, this one's interesting because this is a little bit about the hardware industry. Now, with PC and server cooling has been a challenge for many organizations and PC builders alike for many, many, many years. I remember a trend way back when people were actually submerging their PC components and motherboards in oil to distribute the heat better so they can overclock their machines. Now, there have been server farms buried in salt mines and organizations using cold underground locations so they can pump cold and dry air into their data centers to cool their infrastructure. Now, you have many corporations attempting to submerge data centers underwater to handle heat. Now, PC component makers have started the trends of what they call liquid cooling. Now, this potential market has been around for a while, but for under $100, you can get a CP cooler for your PC and workstation and server. Now, there's different types of cooling here. There's direct to chip, where there's a heat sink that delivers liquid to disperse the heat from either for your CPU or other components on your machine. And there's submerge-based technology, which is similar to the way they actually cool nuclear reactors, and the components are actually submerged in a non-conductive liquid and eventually recycled to ensure the heat release. Now, in the past, this type of technology was only for supercomputers, but it's now made its way downstream to consumers, and data centers are looking to do it as well. Now, today's AI is actually using larger PCs and much more powerful CPUs. So especially the AI type CPUs for FPGA as well as TensorFlow processors. And these are you still using traditional silicon architecture, which requires a large amount of heat to be dissipated. And that's where most data centers are moving to liquid cooling to disperse this heat to generate at scale. Now, in fact, recently, Skybox data centers just released and announced their 250 petaflops of computing power, more than any existing supercomputer, and they expected liquid cooling system for their enclosure servers using more than 720 enclosures in fully submerged tanks filled with dielectric liquid. Now, here's the question. How did liquid cooling go from esoteric science on the fringe of computing all the way down to near mainstream and modern data centers? Well, we want to talk about that. But with the latest push for cooling techniques, dry cooling is also moving into the mainstream as well, where there's a closed loop compression system used to actually cool components and machines. Now, this brings the question. I want to bring my co-host in. With the onset of these massive data centers and the fact that they're being more condensed, they're condensed down because they only have so much surface area to be able to put these servers in here. Is this where we're bringing back liquid cooling? Is that why we're bringing it back, or is there something else going on in the industry? Curtis, I want to bring you in first. What do you think?
Well, I think that there are a bunch of things going on, because if you look at what we're going to call mainstream servers, the kind of servers you see in rack upon rack at data centers, the thing that the manufacturers have been pushing for the past few years is ambient capability. In other words, being able to stick them in a room and within reason, you can run them at ambient temperature. Look at a lot of the systems that are being used at cryptocurrency miners. They're in shipping containers, and ambient is critical there. At the same time, the algorithms that are getting more advanced for those cryptocurrencies, the advent of blockchain, there are a lot of things that are pushing CPU cycles. And as we all know, when you start cranking work through a CPU where it's not sitting there and idling, it's actually working, the heat goes up. And if you're going to be doing something like trying to run them 24/7 mining Bitcoin, then in order to have any kind of longevity, you really do need to have some other form of cooling. And the question becomes, which is more economical, chilled air or water, whether it's chilled or ambient water. The water is getting easier, but the on-chip is the easiest, although the cool factor of doing a submersion is great. I've seen systems where, as you point out, they do it in mineral oil, which is the same technology that they use on all of the electrical transformers you see sitting on poles and in substations. Although the high performance systems use something like liquid freon, which brings the temperature way down and lets you overclock to a ridiculous degree. So I think what we're going to see is really some sort of bifurcation here. For the really large installations of mainstream cloud and data center computing, ambient is going to win, which also explains one of the reasons why you see so many of these big colos and data centers in places like Las Vegas and Reno, between geographical stability and, geological stability and ambient temperatures that allow them to cool the things with just existing air most of the year. They're very economical. But for the supercomputers, for the really high performance systems, cooling is not going to be a barrier to those. And I will say that I have had some conversations in the last few months with folks in the mainframe world where liquid cooling never left. Running big pipes filled with water into mainframe data centers is something that started in the 50s and never went away. Now a lot of those folks are looking at the Intel-based world and having themselves a very pleasant little chuckle.
That's great. So I do want to bring in Heather, because I know what are data centers thinking here? Like, obviously we know that liquid cooling's been around for a while. We know that data centers are getting bigger and more condensed. You've probably seen your fair share of installations here. Why are they just so now moving closer to this technology? What's changing shape here? What do you think?
Well, one, nothing is too good for the data miners, right? We've got to keep the bits flowing. But to borrow from the chat room, I think what's old is new again. And I think that, you've got to take what works. And I wanted to throw in while Curtis was weighing it, which cooling system is more effective and more efficient. You can compare that to the cost of replacing all of your hardware, because as you said, the heat that's generated on these things is absolutely ridiculous.
Right. Well, let's talk a little bit about the next bite, because actually this one's a little bit more interesting. It's a little about how CISOs are actually having mental problems. Is that right, Curtis?
Absolutely, and a surprising number. Now, all of us have known CISOs where we would come out of a meeting and go, they're not quite right in the head. But that's not what this is talking about. With a recent study, a quarter of CISOs suffer from mental and health disorders as a result of the work pressures they're experiencing. Now, the things that contribute to the strain are concerns about job security, inadequate budget and resources, and a continued lack of support from the board and upper management. And this is tied to other surveys that I've seen that point out the fact that one of the bars to a good security posture, one of the things that stands between a CISO and feeling comfortable about his or her organization's ability to respond to an attack, is this lack of resources, both human resources and financial resources to invest in technology. This survey, which was conducted by Nominet, a domain name registry service, found that 91% of the responders admitted to experiencing high to moderate stress. 26%, a little over a quarter, said the stress was impacting them mentally and physically. And a very troubling 17% admitted to turning to alcohol and medication, both licit and illicit, to deal with the stress. So 40-hour work weeks are not things that exist among CISOs. 22%, so over a fifth, said that they are available on a round-the-clock basis. Now think about this. This is someone with a C-level title who says that they have to essentially have a pager on so that they can be available 24/7. 9 out of 10 of those based in the U.S. said they don't take a break from work that lasts 2 weeks or more. They just can't do it. So what do we need to do about this? We know that there is a top management disconnect. The other individuals in the C-suite and the board of directors seem to have no appreciation for the kind of stresses that the CISOs are feeling. They're looking at massive data sets that have all kinds of points of entry. They're looking at growing cloud application frameworks that have all kinds of connectors and places where a hacker can gain entry. So I'm curious with both my co-hosts, and Lou, I'm going to start with you. Does this match up with what you have seen in the people you deal with at the corporate level?
Yeah, I mean, do I see people having issues? Yeah, I mean, obviously there's definitely a scenario where, you know, cloud services and organizations that are exposed to the internet, especially that service organizations, they have these jobs where they have to have rotations, call rotations, and ensure that they have or they're connected 24/7, especially for those big customers out there. And I think that, you know, these data centers, these NOC locations, all of these potential locations have to be able to handle these types of things. And sometimes they're looking for escalation. So you have a big organization like a bank that comes in and says, I'm having a problem, and they're dealing with whether it's support engineers or escalation engineers or just network engineers. They want to talk all the way up the chain. They want to know that they're getting supported by a representative that's going to get them their stuff fixed fast. And so that's why these people are actually on call all the time, and they have to be, because they have to represent their service, their organization. And so I can honestly say that it does get tiring after a while. I've worked in services in the past where you were on call 24/7, and it does not stop. Like, there are things going wrong and you're constantly fixing things. That's the whole idea between continuous integration and deployment. You're constantly fixing and deploying things and making sure that you kind of solidify your service. So I can honestly say that there's a lot of stress and pressure on these individuals. So I'm not too surprised that people are actually, you know, running into problems and issues and need help. And I can say that, you know, this is just maybe a type of the part of the actual industry that might need some more help from different software and different technology to help with this stress, and also help release some of that stress. What that technology is, I don't know, but hopefully in the future we'll see better stuff.
Well, I'm going to come back to you with a follow-up question in just a moment. But before I do, I want to turn to Heather. There's no doubt that the CISOs are under tremendous stress, but in today's business environment where you've got globalization going on, you've got rising costs of materials, fickle customers, all kinds of things, do you get the sense that CISOs are under more pressure than the other people who have C in the title? Or do you think that the CISOs are just better at complaining about it?
No, I think that they actually, and it may be just that it's what we see, and so we have more of a empathy for them. But let's just go with an average news day. You turn the news on, the chances of you seeing a discussion about yet another breach or another vulnerability being discussed are not bad. And is there any other C-level guy or girl that's going to turn the news on a semi-regular basis and see something that directly impacts their day, their week, their month, their quarter, right there on CNN. I don't. Maybe there's some really exciting accounting news that I've missed, but I think that the CISO guys really are under constant fire. I was laughing because Lou said, I don't know what that technology is going to look like, but we need something to get, to help. And my first thought was, and then it will have a vulnerability or a breach. So it's almost a self-replicating problem. I would like to add one other thing, because obviously I am not somebody who has ever aspired or will aspire to a C-level position. But I'm in a unique situation of, I go to these conferences. If you go to a trade show, I don't know that either of you have ever had the experience of walking in a show floor and not being able to get the attention of somebody besides, if you'll excuse the terminology, a booth babe. If you wanted to talk to the engineer or somebody serious at the booth, I will bet you that not only do you not have a problem with it, that you actually have trouble getting past them because they all want to talk to you. I am wearing an invisibility cloak. I sometimes refer to them as mammary glands, but I don't know what it is. But when I walk through a trade show, I cannot get anyone to pay any attention to me or answer a question. So last year, I changed my, when I registered, I changed my title and I put down CISO to see if that maybe get a little bit more attention. It didn't, but it got me an incredible amount of spam. Everybody who scanned from so I can tell you that these guys, my inbox for the next 6 months exploded with everybody wanting to get my attention about everything. So just dealing with their daily email must be incredibly stressful.
Well, that invisibility cloak is something that I know that Chibert is listening, and I think there is a worthwhile episode of Twiat down the line where we look at some of those issues. But before we get to that very critical topic, I want to wrap up with this one. And Lou, I want to get back to you, because I know that I have taken management training classes at various times where they say things like, if you have an employee who is consistently working more than 40 hours a week, then you've either got a problem with the employee or you have a problem with the job. You should be able to define a job that can be done in 40 hours a week and find the individual to go into it. So, question to you is, with all of this talk about stress, with all of the hours, with all of the everything else, should we be providing more support to these CISOs, or is it time to look at fundamentally redefining the job to make it possible without harming the individual who holds the title?
Yeah, that's a great question. I honestly think that there's two parts to it. One is obviously the job definition might not need to be changed. I think that obviously, their individual requirements of the job is fine. I think the biggest part is because they're decision makers, they're ones that run, the entire organization. But I think what needs to change is potentially the processes, the workflows. And like you said, anytime you have a problem with somebody who's spending more time in working longer hours, there's usually a problem in the process, and there's usually a problem in the system. And that's where I think leadership should get to work. I think they should get to work and understand, okay, well, obviously leadership is running into a problem of working overtime. This obviously is going to trickle down to the rest of the organization. You're going to have an unhappy organization. How can we model it so that it doesn't work that way anymore? And I think that's where it's different for every organization. I'm not going to pretend to know for every one of them, but I have seen shifts and pivots in organizations in order to alter the way things are being done. Like I was saying, we used to do rotations. We used to add in more systems to use more machine learning and AI to determine issues faster, or even before customers ran into them. I've seen better logging, better tracing, more alerts, using systems to handle these types of things, and be able to route them correctly, not just to the leadership. So I think that these are things that organizations should definitely take better look at, even before you have a problem with people running into longer hours. But in the same sense, to answer your question, I definitely think that it's time to not necessarily redefine the job title or the job requirement, but to redefine the process. Well, folks, that does it for the Bites. Next up, we have a really great guest to bring some knowledge to the Twilight Riot. But before we do, we have to thank another great sponsor of This Week in Enterprise Tech, and that's LastPass. Now, who loves LastPass? I do. I'm gonna take a guess that there's probably a bunch of hands raising out there. I've used LastPass so often now, I don't even know I'm using it anymore. It's one of my favorite tools. Now, think about it. You have a username and password for every site you go to. For me, it's 5 different banks. I'm supposed to have a different username and password for each one of those sites. It becomes almost impossible to remember and manage. And you don't want to write it on a sticky note because people can find it. You don't want to put it in your email because it's open text. That's where LastPass comes in and saves us all. LastPass automatically remembers and fills your passwords anytime, anywhere, your computer, your mobile device, anywhere. All you have to do is remember your master password, and LastPass remembers the rest. Now, I got hooked on it when I was using it on my desktop, but it's so useful. I use it on all of my devices now. It supports all the modern browsers out there: Chrome, Edge, Firefox, Opera, more. Plus, they have it works great with Android and iOS as well. Now, I remember one day I was at work. My family called. They said, "Hey, we can't get into the account. We need to make a payment." They called me. All I had to do is use my LastPass master password on LastPass Vault there, and bam! I knew I could give them the password. They could pay the bill, and I didn't have to be bothered anymore. It literally has saved me time, which for me, time is actually money. Now, I'm talking a little bit about my personal use account on LastPass, but they also have LastPass families for the entire family, and LastPass works amazing for enterprise too. Now, enterprises are always battling people trying to breach their networks. In fact, there's an interesting piece of data. Over 81% of breaches are caused by weak or reused passwords. Well, LastPass makes it easy to use unique random passwords for all of your employees, and they don't have to remember or write them down. Now, in a large organization, people have to share passwords all the time, and that's a hard thing to secure. So passing a sticky note is not just going to do it for this. So LastPass makes it easy for your organization to share passwords. Plus, it also allows for the complete customization around access. Now, they also offer multi-factor auth too. With the LastPass Authenticator, it blocks attackers from ensuring the identity of the accessor. Now, plus, get this. This will raise some eyebrows for IT admins. They now support Active Directory integration too. Now, employees who use LastPass can actually just use their AD credentials. So this way, you're reducing down the amount of passwords you use, even down to just one. So not only to access your network or your properties on your network, but also to get access to your LastPass passwords as well. Now, this makes it super easy. I can tell you data is encrypted and decrypted at the device level, so data is stored in the vault, and it's kept secret even from LastPass. I can tell you honestly, I love using LastPass. I'm a LastPass user for life. Now, join over 43,000 businesses and find the best password solution for your team at LastPass.com/twit. That's LastPass.com/twit. And we thank LastPass for their support of This Week in Enterprise Tech. Well, folks, it's now time for my favorite part of the show, and that's when we bring a guest in to drop some knowledge on the Twilight Riot. And today is no exception. We have Malcolm Ross, VP of Products at Appian. Malcolm, welcome to the show.
Great to be here. Thanks, Lou. Great to see you, Heather and Curt as well.
Now, our audience loves to hear origin stories and people's journeys through tech. Can you maybe take us through your journey through tech?
It starts a long time ago. So in 1987, my parents got me an IBM PS2, and basically from there on out, I've been kind of addicted to computers. So back then, I was 12 years old at the time, just got into figuring out this computer, loading software on it. My friends got me into BBSs, getting into downloading software, got maybe a little bit of piracy in there because I was 13 years old and didn't have much money. And then I wanted to figure out how stuff was working. So I started self-teaching myself and downloading software off the BBS systems, using my 1200 baud modem at the time and decompiling stuff into MASM. And someone told me I could do this. So I looked at this MASM code, Microsoft Macro Assembler, and wondered what it was. So just self-taught myself Microsoft Macro Assembler as kind of the first programming language I got into. And the whole purpose of that was try to figure out how software was made and how it was being used. Then just been kind of passionate about it since. So got into a number of kind of enterprise jobs. I was about 16, 17 years old. I was working for a mortgage company actually down in Florida, building. They initially hired me as to basically load documents. Back then, underwriters would have these big mortgage package paperwork, and I was the labor guy who would be loading all the stuff and putting into long-term storage. Then they had me doing data entry on the old VAX system, and then they had me building a new Foxborough database for all their wholesale mortgage rates that would go out to the retail mortgage lenders every single day. And I was 17 years old at the time, and it's a cool little job. I was into programming, got into doing some database development. Didn't realize there was a career in software at the time. It was just kind of like my side job I was doing after school, and thought I needed to be a lawyer or a doctor or something. So went to a liberal arts school and thought I'd study pre-law, and realized that was a really bad mistake, because every single time I would go around, work on computers there, someone would offer me a job. So I was like, okay, well, maybe I need to get out of this liberal arts school. So I basically dropped out of school when I was 19 years old. Moved back down with my parents in Florida and got a job at a company called ID on Credit Card Services. And I was just 19 years old, and they hired me as a kind of an hourly employee, and got into building a TQM tracking database on SQL Server. So got into doing some early software developments, like the mid-90s timeframe. And then from there, I realized, hey, people would actually pay me to do software development. Is coming kind of realizing as a late teenager that this could actually be a career. So switched over to Florida State University, got my degree in computer and information science with a studies in actuarial mathematics. Finished that up. From there, got into network engineering. So got my Compact ASE, MCSE, HP Star. Started doing a lot of network engineering work at JP Morgan, at PSINet, at all over the place. At what's the ratings company, Nielsen Media Research as well. I worked down there as well, doing network, basically packet analysis, network optimization, Cisco routers, things like that. And then from there, I did network engineering for about 2 or 3 years, and then decided to get back into software. And at this time, is getting into the .com bubble, so got into doing some .NET coding, and or at the time Com Plus coding, and was building .com sites, and is doing sales and systems engineering for a company called OneSoft, and basically working on sites like Black & Decker, Lowe's, things like that, and building these kind of retail e-commerce sites. From there, been still in the software development realm since the 2000s. After the .com bust, and no one's been building retail sites as much, got into the process area. So been in the process automation, business process management software market now, and now the low-code software development market for about 18 years. So at Appian now for about 14 years.
Wow.
So long journey.
You have quite the journey. That's quite the journey.
It was too much information.
No, that was great. That's quite the journey. I think one of the interesting things that leads into this great topic. I mean, I'm coming from the Power Apps group. I can tell you this is a great topic to talk about. There's lots of organizations out there that need help in this area. Maybe you can take us a little bit through what Appian is trying to solve here, and a little bit about low-code solutions.
Yeah, I mean, low code, I firmly believe is the future. If you just look at the statistics out there, something like 2016, there was 36,000 computer science majors in the United States. That's way too few computer science majors. And you hear all the challenges when it comes to software development. When it comes to doing enterprise tech, it is as specialized as a medical field. You have network engineers, security officers, software developers, all sorts of nuanced aspects, database developers, DBAs, network optimization, cloud specialists. You can specialize in as many areas of software development as you could in the medical industry, I believe. And that's a challenge because you rely on a really tight coordination of all these resources to deliver effective software solutions to market. And the problem is there's too few people who know how to do this, who know how to do this well. You see this time and time again. I think you started the show today with all those hack notifications. These are people who aren't staying atop of the database injection attacks, SQL cross-site scripting attacks, Poodle attacks on SSL3, all these attack mechanisms. You need to be a software developer. You need to know how to build secure software and do it well. So low code is basically the answer. Two things need to change. Either we need to have a lot more developers who know what they're doing, know how to build really quality software, or we need to make the act of software development easier. And that's the nature of low code. It's trying to provide a platform that doesn't just provide, obviously, a visual paradigm for building software, but also allows you to not worry about the complex things behind the scenes, such as when there's a new version of JDK and you need to update your Java development kits. That's kind of maintenance activities that, no one in your business side of your enterprise is going to care about, but software developers need to worry about is making sure their systems are current and secure.
Right.
The low-code platforms like Appian are going to take care of that back office work, that maintenance work, and allow a platform that allows you to very quickly deliver software fast and give powerful amplifiers that don't just, give that visual design paradigm, but give you a platform to really do something very reliably on as well.
So now you bring an interesting point. Like, I think that a lot of organizations out there, they have some really sophisticated IT organizations, but they sometimes need additional software to support them. They don't necessarily have traditional software developers on their staff to be able to do that. And so it sounds like this type of low-code solution can help with that. Now, does Appian handle the full stack? Do you start with UX all the way, UI all the way up to the back end, or how's that work out?
We do, yeah. We do full UX, full stack development on the Appian platform. So when you think about that, it's, again, to think about a low-code platform, what it is, it's think about your best software developer, the guy or gal who can crank out, awesome software that's secure, scalable, reliable. And what are the defining qualities of that person? It's not just being able to do something fast and secure and reliable. It's also being able to communicate effectively with your business, understand what the business wants to build in a digital experience, and convey that very effectively as well. So Appian, but from the tool set perspective, is obviously a full stack environment. It allows you to build user experience, mobile applications, allows you to build back-end data models, persist those data models to different sources, allows you to big process orchestrations, business rule logic, expression algorithmic logic, all these different ways of expressing software logic. But more importantly, we try to do this in a way that the business can also participate, maybe not directly in the software development cycle, but look at, say, a process diagram and use standards like the BPMN, Business Process Modeling Notation, which is actually a standard developed to help the communication between business and IT. Another example is like DMN, Decision Modeling Notation, which is decision tables. Business users have been using decision tables to define insurance policies, things like this for decades. Well, wouldn't it be great if we can just turn a decision table that an insurance adjuster knows and turn that into the functional logic? So have that communication mechanism that allows you to turn business decisions and business logic into digital applications very quickly.
Right. Now, the interesting thing about kind of this space is I've seen in the past many designers and application tools and templates to basically allow businesses and line of business applications to be built for especially people who are not really coders or database or back-end people. And it's definitely helped out. The interesting thing here is that it actually helps sometimes organizations learn how to develop applications. Then they can become more complex, and they might want to add in their own logic in there, maybe their own scripting or their own code. Now, does this help as well? Does Appian allow the organization to kind of grow up into that mature development organization as well?
It does. There's an aspect allow them, but it seems like your connotation there is that they're still falling back on traditional software development. The types of applications that we're building are top level apps. We built things like the back office support, not the front end website for the Affordable Care Act that had that massive failure, but the back office case management solution for all the call center operations. That was complex 2,000 pages of legal legislation entirely expressed in a low code platform to execute inside that system. So if a low-code platform is working effectively, it doesn't just accelerate the productivity of a developer, and it also aligns, again, business and IT on a common platform. It's forcing maybe agile adoption methodology for implementing software, which the foundation of agile, usually if you're having implementation challenges with agile, it usually breaks down the business IT communication, where either one of the participants is not really getting it or not participating effectively. Low-code platforms, again, because it's expressing the logic, the code in a way, in a visual paradigm that the business can collaborate on, it really facilitates that communication between business and IT to kind of deliver that true agile experience that you want.
Right. Makes sense. Now, before I bring my co-host back in, I do want to ask about this. So you talked a little about doing full stack development. Now, there are obviously there's more to just developing the software too. There's lots of things like deploying and integration and making sure that things stay up to date for customers. And like, for instance, mobile devices, you have to be able to deploy and continuously deploy your mobile app, especially when you make updates. Now, does this system support that as well?
Yeah, well, it's nuanced there. So Appian, for example, how we do native mobile is we actually ship a container application. The container application interprets the code on the fly from the server. So it's an interpretation layer that's run to that. So we actually don't need to do mobile updates to clients. You don't need to compile that application and then deliver the application to the mobile platforms. Simply as I make changes to the logic on the server, that mobile interpreter, that native mobile client's going to interpret a log. It's much to a similar case of a, say, HTML web browser on a mobile device, interprets the logic on the server, but in a full native mobile client experience. That said as well, you covered some important topics of supporting the entire DevOps process. DevOps infrastructure, dev test production, integration with continuous integration platforms, CI platforms like Jenkins or Bamboo, integration with ticketing management like Jira. Those are all key parts of any software development lifecycle, whether it's low code or traditional software development. So if you're expecting that, from a low code vendor, you should, because if you're going to use this for serious software application development lifecycle, you still need to do testing. It still needs to support Cucumber with Gherkin syntax or fitness scripts for, integration level testing of the UI, things like that.
Right, makes sense. Now, one last question before I bring the co-host back in. The interesting thing is I found a lot of times that one of the hardest things is actually to integrate data from other applications and services. Does Appian help here as well?
Absolutely. Again, entirely part of the overall solution is have a no-code integration capability. So how we approach that is kind of multiple layers. First, there's a number of package integration capabilities to the platform. So it allows you to, say, connect to AWS S3 or Google Cloud Services or Salesforce, other environments through no-code integration. So it's kind of pre-built integrations, point and click, choose what you want to actually put into the Appian product and orchestrate inside our system. With that, there's always going to be systems that we don't have integration adapters for, legacy mainframe systems, Fortran 77 systems, things like that. And so what we allow you to do is have a traditional development experience. You can load up IntelliJ and build a Java plugin to basically deploy inside the environment. So that plugin can create new custom integrations, handling new authentication patterns. So it's that extensibility of the low-code platform that allows you to not just kind of work inside the parameters of the platform defined, but also extend those parameters to reach out to other systems and other capabilities.
Fantastic. Well, I do want to bring in my co-host. I want to start with Curtis. You have some questions about efficiencies and security.
Well, I do. And one of the things, now, I will say you were talking about your history in the industry. And I would be lying if I didn't say that I was writing some of the articles that you were probably reading as a teenager.
Okay.
So I've been around a while. And I can remember what it was like to go through and count bytes on code to fit it in. Obviously, we're well past that. But my question is, are we at a point where the efficiency of the code itself doesn't matter, or is Appian a package that actually manages to produce efficient code? How resource efficient is it?
It's highly resource efficient. Again, we are an interpretation layer for your business logic. So what you express in Appian is actually like an XML definition. So you have a visual design paradigm for laying out a process, a rule, things like this, as well as some syntax information for like expression rules. But ultimately that gets into an interpretation engine, not a compiler. And that means that there is a little bit more flexibility to change things on the fly and handle change management, then recompile, deploy. With that, you're bringing up about that article, about kind of that, I'm losing my track here, but talking about that interpretation layer, the Appian product is really a bit different approach in low code and software development. It's not that traditional software coding, development and deploy and compile and deploy and then change management. It's that kind of fluid interpretation layer given instructions. So one of the challenges, of course, when you have these free-form environments like JavaScript, for example, I would bet the most of the attacks out there happening on the web are because of things like cross-site scripting attacks, due to bad JavaScripting, or SQL injections due to bad kind of JavaScript logic inside the web layer inside an environment. So there's always a challenge when you give that too much freedom to software developers that they can really kind of code themselves in a hole or code themselves security holes in their product. So what Appian does is through that interpretation layer, we give you kind of a prescribed format for laying out a UI. There's a lot of flexibility inside of there. There's not as much flexibility as JavaScript, for example, but you can lay out any enterprise application, forms, reports, dashboards, things like that. And then what we're going to do is we're going to pre-harden that layer. So what we're going to guarantee is that there's no possibility of a JavaScript attack because you can't write JavaScript inside of it. It's an interpretation layer. All server-side logic occurs, or all client-side interaction logic occurs on the server, and then it's going to render that result back to the client. I know I'm getting a little esoteric with the architecture here, but it is a different architecture that's designed to protect our clients from getting into bad traps of security issues or scalability issues or other issues that you have common with software development.
Okay, so you segued nicely into my next question, which is about security, because as we all know, a non-trivial portion of all of the vulnerabilities out there come through some sort of error in the code development process.
Exactly. Yep.
And so with what you're saying, is Appian making it more difficult to code in an insecure way, or are you getting to the point where you would say it is inherently safe, which has some connotations that are kind of out there?
So we are removing a lot of the complexity when it takes to security. So yes, there are certain things in our architecture that we're doing which make it impossible to have these security holes, such as, when running an Appian cloud, we're always going to make sure, you're on TLS 1.2 or higher. You don't have any potential for a poodle attack on an SSL3 protocol, maintaining the infrastructure network layer, software updates, the JDK platform, and the other kind of supporting components like the database layer. That's all going to be taken care of. But you need to have that freedom to design what you want and define your own security layer. So there's always going to be some responsibility for the clients to configure the application properly and the security permissions properly. But the inherent security architecture vulnerabilities that are typically inherent with software development, such as cross-site scripting attacks, poodle attacks, things like this, those aren't going to be present inside the architecture. So there is a responsibility of the client, again, to make sure that they have that properly designed application, but the architectural is going to be much more secure. And we certify this to make sure to give our clients confidence. We do a full security audit of our entire product every single quarter release. So we never release software unless it goes through an external auditor. We even have multiple auditors we work with where we release the code to, and we rotate the auditors every quarter because auditors can also get complicit with their security certifications. When they look at something, they say, I tested that last quarter, so I'm not going to try it again. So we'll rotate the auditors to make sure that they don't get complicit in testing our product. We also do active attacks on our platform, both digital attacks, through the internet, as well as digging through garbage, looking at working directly with our software developers and trying to do phishing attacks through email on our own software developers to make sure that's also secure. And then, of course, what we also provide is things like FedRAMP 2 security certifications, PCI, HIPAA, all these certifications also to give that extra attestation that we're doing everything properly to make sure the architecture is reliable.
Fantastic. I want to bring Mo in. Mo, I want to ask you, you've worked with tons of organizations around the world. Obviously there's got to be some out there that need solutions that don't have developers, right? I mean, there's got to be some out there.
No, exactly. And we've made note a couple of times on this show about the lack of people out there, especially on the security side. I'm going to pivot a little bit because I'm coming at this from a different point of view. Unlike Lou, I don't have a real background in coding, and sort of like you, I started in a liberal arts program. I didn't have the luxury of dropping out because I dropped out at 16 from high school. So I was in it it was a graduate or die situation. Death being you were going to have to go back to high school, which believe me, I had nightmares about for quite a while. But so I ended up in this career. I've always equated it to just sheer dumb luck meets some awful lot of hard work. So one of the early things that I did was actually using some object-oriented programming. So I played at being a programmer, and I wondered, and what that allowed me to do is take some of, the esoteric background, like, I could quote from Pliny the Elder, and apply it to something that is actually needed, but on the technology side. Does this open up DevOps to a group of people for whom they would never have thought of themselves as ending up with a career in technology? And does it help solve some of the shortages that we have out there in terms of finding qualified people to come in and do this kind of work? And can we then sucker them into aspiring to being a Wi-Fi engineer or something even greater?
Yeah, that's exactly the point. Is either software development's got to get easier, or we got to get more expert computer scientists to do this, because the demand is so high. There's not possibly enough people out there to satisfy the demand for new digital solutions out there in the market. So, low code is a response to that, and allowing the barriers of entry to building software is much more approachable. So that, yes, that does mean, for example, most of the people in our professional services organization at Appian are English majors, business majors, non-technical majors that we empower with about 2-3 weeks of training on the Appian product, who can effectively build solutions. And again, they can define logic in simple ways that make sense to them, process flow diagrams, decision tables, things like this. Most people can learn that. It's not, you don't have to learn a very complex syntax like JavaScript or C# or things like this. And they can build solutions also that, when deployed to an architecture, are reliable, secure, and scalable as well.
So really quick, we're running a little bit low on time, but I do want to ask one more question in regards to organizations. So some organizations already have applications out there, both back office applications, internal applications, that they're not necessarily happy with. And some of them are just on premise. They're integrated within their intranet there. Now, if they wanted to move on to this platform, is there a possibility for hybrid type application? Is there a possibility for moving into the cloud? Is there a migration process that's offered?
Yeah, typically, to get started in a platform like ours, obviously there's free trials on Appian.com. You can just register very quickly and get access to a full environment. But oftentimes our customers will work with a hybrid architecture where they want to maybe use Appian as a logic area where they're going to define process flow logic, interface logic, and rule logic, and keep the data. Maybe they have a legacy system with a database model already built. Simply attach that data source to the Appian cloud environment through a secure VPN tunnel communication, and of course use that data and keep it where it lies while adding that kind of layer of logic on top of it. Some of our customers, like University of South Florida, they were able to get started in just about 3 weeks, have their first application for student records, as well as medical student lottery and travel requirements, and course records for students as well. Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, folks, we're running low on time, but we've been talking with Malcolm Ross, VP of Products at Appian. Thank you so much for being here. Maybe you can tell the folks at home, I know you kind of alluded to this just a second ago, but maybe tell organizations where they can go, where they can get started, and maybe where they can find you and some of and all the work that you're doing.
Sure. Yeah, I'm happy to share. Yeah, the best place to go for us is Appian.com. As I mentioned, free trials are right up there in the upper right-hand corner. You can register for a free trial, get access to a full design environment for those enterprise customers. And of course, if you'd like to learn more, there's lots of great materials on here, as well as our YouTube channel. If you go to youtube.com/AppianBPM, you'll see lots of great product videos, information about what the low code and process automation in Appian is all about. And of course, you can find me on LinkedIn, find me in the internet, Google me anytime. You'll find me very easily. Ross@Appian.com is my email address.
Fantastic. Well, folks, you've done it again. You've sat through another hour of the Best Dang Enterprise podcast in the universe, according to 9 out of 10 lab applications. But I want to thank everyone who makes this show possible, especially my co-host in crime. I want to start with Ms. Heather Williams. Thank you so much for being here again. I know you got lots of travels coming up. Maybe you can tell the folks at home where they can find you and all of your amazing work.
Well, my snarky work is at Twitter at Mo Better Wi-Fi. If you're looking for any kinds of product solutions, you can hit me up at Ruckus.
Fantastic. So much, Heather. Of course, we have to thank our very own Mr. Curtis Franklin. Curtis, where can everyone find you and all of your work?
Well, my regular work shows up at darkreading.com. Got some more entertaining pieces coming up during the next couple of weeks before I get to RSA. And I usually tweet about that, and actually a lot of stuff besides. Over on Twitter, my handle there is KG4GWA.
Fantastic. Well, we also have to thank you as well. You're the person who drops in each and every week. You are our loyal listeners, our loyal watchers to get your enterprise goodness. And we want to make it easy for you to watch and listen the show. Catch up on your enterprise news. Go to the show page right now, twit.tv/Twyet. There you'll find all of our back episodes, plus all the show notes, information about the co-hosts and the guests, as well as all the links to all the shows and during the shows that we actually talk about. In fact, next to those great links and those great videos, you'll find those helpful subscribe links and download links. You want to support and help the show, go ahead and subscribe to your audio version, video version, or HD video version of your choice. It's the best way to stay on top of your enterprise and IT news, so go ahead and subscribe today. Now, after you subscribe, also remember we do this show live each and every week at live.twit.tv on Fridays at 1:30 Pacific. And of course, we also have our live chat room as well. We get some great content from them throughout the show, so go ahead and check it out. If you're jumping in live, you might as well jump into the chat room as well, irc.twit.tv. Now, you can always follow me at twitter.com/LouMM. You can check out what I do during my daily normal work week, as well as you can check out dev.office.com to check out how you can extend and expand your Office capabilities and make it more productive. Now, I also want to thank everyone who makes this show possible, especially to Leo and Lisa, who continue to support us each and every week to do this show, as well as all of the engineers at Twit. And of course, thank you to Mr. Brian Chi, who's actually in the chat room right now, and he's also in the back channel here. He's definitely always supporting us. He's our loyal producer, and he gets all of the great guests and the show content. So thank you to Chibert to help us each and every week. Now, before we sign out, we have to thank our TD for today. Victor, thank you so much for being here again. Again, let's tradition. I want to ask, what was the main topic of the show today?
I have two. So
okay.
One was making code easier. And then two, I'm going to go hug my CISO.
Wow, we've trained him well.
Everyone should hug their CISO. But yeah, so I would say very, very close. So close. I would say definitely low code for sure, but it's just making it no code. I think that's the key, is making your organization have to deal with no code. But maybe next time, Victor. Thanks so much. But folks, of course, until next time, I'm Louis Maresca, just reminding you, if you want to know what's going on in the enterprise, just keep quiet.